Open the New York Times today and you'll see photos, headlines, interactive infographics, audio, videos, and text articles. I can name almost any newspaper or magazine, social media platform, campaign website, or brand homepage and say the same. Communication today switches mediums like a chameleon switches colors wandering in a field of Skittles. Our students know communication has changed, and they need practice sharing ideas in different mediums and weaving those mediums together. Enter one-pagers, an easy on-ramp for communicating through multiple mediums at once. Students learn to play with color, icons, and imagery that complement their quotations and analysis in bringing home their ideas. Today, I want to walk you through everything I've learned about one-pagers over the last decade or so working with them. We'll start with the nuts and bolts of what they are and a quick review, and then talk about where to find models, why templates are such a helpful scaffold, what elements you might require on your one-pagers, and a laundry list of ways to use them creatively in class. Oh, and we'll wrap up with some ideas for other projects and strategies you might try in class if you love one-pagers. Ready to go? Welcome to the Spark Creativity Teacher Podcast, a podcast for English teachers looking for more creativity, more engagement, more joy, and no more scripted curriculum, lesson planning ruts, or boring book lists. I'm Betsy Potash, and I'm honored you're trusting me to help. You're not alone on this creative journey anymore. Okay, so first things first, just in case you haven't heard of them before, what's a one-pager? Well, it's really kind of self-explanatory. In the business world, a one-pager is a consolidated summary of some issue or program that someone might create to help someone else catch up quickly. Imagine a staffer in a senator's office who generally does research and focuses on environmental issues, and their senator needs to be caught up on a proposal for a new solar program. They might make a one-pager with all the details, the key stats, a little graph, a quote that's really fundamental, and then hand it to that senator who can read it in 5 minutes and feel prepared to talk about the new solar program. One-pagers are a convenient strategy in the business world, and they're a pretty great strategy for ELA too. In education, the AVID program first adapted the one-pager for the classroom. And since then, as far as I can tell, so many different people have put their own spin on it. In education, like in the world outside of schools, a one-pager is just a chance to cut to the core and show what you know. Students need to boil down their takeaways from whatever they've learned, really, in any discipline, and then present it all back in a single page. In ELA, it's been really popular as a novel assessment, but today we're going to talk about a lot of other options too in just a bit. But before we do, I want to give you an idea of some places where you can find models of one-pagers because seeing one-pagers really helps you believe. It helps you understand what you're going for and just kind of makes it easier to dig in. So I have one blog post called the One-Pagers Roundup Examples to Inspire, and I created that with the help of many teachers in the Creative High School English Facebook group, and that would be a great place to start if you haven't seen a lot of one-pagers in action. It just has a ton of different ones created by different students with slightly different assignments, and so you can kind of see the range of what students might create. I will also, of course, put some in the show notes today, quite a few. Another great place to look is just to hop onto Instagram and do a search for the hashtag one-pagers. You will see hundreds, if not thousands, of examples on Instagram if you do that. Same thing if you open Pinterest and type in one-pagers, you're going to see a ton of examples. Okay, one thing you're going to notice when you're looking at all these visuals is that some are on a purely blank page and students have just created this kind of artistic rendering of their takeaways, and some are on templates. So now let's talk a little bit about why you might want to use templates as a scaffold for your students. One-pagers don't have to be broken up into sections on the page. In fact, some of the most stunning ones you'll see in your look at the models maybe won't have that sort of specific black lined template on the page. For really, really artistic students, the ones who create one pagers that get 10,000 likes on Instagram, the freedom to create whatever they want across the page is really wonderful, and that's great. But for maybe 95.5% of students, having a roadmap, the kind of thing that a template can provide, is really helpful in creating a successful one-pager. So how do you create a template? Well, it's really simple. You're going to break up the page into sections. You could even just have students like draw a line down the middle of their paper and then draw another line down the middle going the other way. So they have 4 quadrants. Or you can get into Canva or PowerPoint or slides and sort of drop shapes in. So you have these different sections on the page. Then you match the elements that you want students to add to their one-pager with specific areas of that page. Okay, so for example, maybe you want them to choose the most important quotation from a book and put it in like a little circle in the very center of the page, along with an image that somehow represents that quotation. Instead of giving them a blank page and saying, represent the book, you're giving them this very step-by-step, this is how you're going to translate your takeaways onto this page and explain them through your analysis, through your words, and through your images, through your colors. You're gonna take them step by step through the process. Now, even if you do choose to do a template like this, you can always leave the free choice option for students who would prefer to put the same elements onto a blank page in their own way. That's like the advanced level option. You can also move toward that if you do a series of, say, 4 one-pagers across the year. I've heard from teachers who like to do a one-pager with each of their units and kind of change it and tweak it and have students advance in their use of one-pagers. It's a strategy that they can get better at, right? So maybe your first assignment is very clear with a very play-by-play template, and your second assignment brings in more sort of student choice and has a looser template, and your third assignment is maybe a blank page, or you provide the option of a blank page, and you kind of move students forward with their skills. Okay, so let's dive in a little more on what kinds of elements might belong on a one-pager. Now, obviously, this is going to depend on what you're creating a one-pager for, but let's talk a little bit about a novel. If you're creating a novel-based one-pager, then you might consider having sections on writing style, characterization, themes, symbolism, connection to current events, connection to other works, connection to the students' lives. Any sections like this can help inspire students to analyze the text in a meaningful way. One thing that's important to note is that when you're creating directions for your template, you want to guide students in exploring the components of the one-pager in text and visuals. So again, for some students, it feels very natural to showcase their ideas with words and sketches, icons, colors. But for some students who haven't had much practice conveying their ideas with visuals, it's helpful to give those reminders. So you might say, okay, you're going to put a border around your one-pager that includes words and or images to represent the main themes of the work. But you might also want to say, use a representative color. Use a color that you feel like reinforces these main themes. And then maybe you want to tell them a little bit about color theory, or you want to talk a little bit about sort of warm colors are red and orange and yellow. That's going to convey more energy and positivity. Cool colors are blue and green and purple. That's going to translate into more of like a calm feeling in the border of your one-pager. Or maybe you're inviting them to choose the most important symbol in the text and put it in a certain area. You might say, write the most important symbol, but then also create an image behind the word that helps reinforce the meaning of that symbol in the text. Or you're going to say, put a key quotation that helps express the development of the protagonist in the bottom left. But then you also want to maybe give them some hints about the visuals, like ask them to reinforce the most important word or couple of words in the quotation with their choice of font or their choice of colors. putting in kind of these little cues to help them consider the visuals as well as the text part of their one pager can help them grow those skills. Okay, so moving beyond novel-based one-pagers, just follow a similar format with whatever content you're inviting students to analyze through their one-pager. So, like for a poetry one-pager, you might have sections on poetic devices, themes, connections to other poems, connections to current events, key quotations that represent the main idea, etc. It's not too different as you move from genre to genre. You're just trying to help students hone in on whatever you would normally analyze through an assessment, except you're doing it with this combination of textual analysis and visual analysis, and you want to cue both with your directions. We're going to talk more about different types of one-pagers in just a second. But first, I want to just kind of drill down on this struggle, because some students are going to struggle with the art aspects of one-pagers, even with your scaffolding, even with your template and your visual cues. It's just going to feel to them like it's an art project, and they don't like art projects because somebody told them they were bad at art in first grade and they've never really liked art since. And it's it makes me sad. And I wanna give care and attention to those students and help them to develop more creative confidence. And one way that I think we can do that is by providing them a digital option with one-pagers. I have explored this quite a bit personally in creating models for students, and I think that digital one-pagers have a lot of potential. Whether students are pretty adept with digital tools and they want to use a platform like Canva, or even if they just want to use slides, I think you can accomplish a lot of the same things that you can accomplish by hand digitally. And so all the instructions are going to be exactly the same. You're just going to provide that template that you were providing on paper in the platform that they want to use, whether it's Canva or slides or the platform that you want them to use. And then they can drop in their text and they can edit the fonts and the colors digitally. And when they want an icon, they can pull an icon. And when they want a drawing, they can choose a drawing, and they can kind of layer things and choose background colors and place things just so. And when they make a mistake, they can just delete it and start again. And I think for kids who are feeling intimidated by pen and paper or markers or paints or whatever they're using for their one-pager, having that digital option where they can really play around and they don't feel as much pressure artistically can be very helpful. So I want to just encourage you to keep that in the back of your mind as an option. Okay, so now we're going to run through all the types of one-pagers that I've created project assignments for over the last decade. And it is so many because really it can apply to just every area of ELA, and it's quite fun. So we're just going to quickly go through some options just to kind of inspire your creativity as you think about where to use this strategy. So first of all, there are novel one-pagers. This one is the classic. It is a very easy win for a novel-based assessment, especially if you're not wanting to do a full essay, or students have been in book clubs and they've all read different things and you want them to kind of be able to present their takeaways back to each other quickly. One-pagers are a great assessment for a novel. Whenever you're crafting a one-pager assignment for a novel, you can choose to focus on any aspects of the reading. So if there's something you've been specifically working on, you can really highlight that in your one-pager. And then you just want to think about how students might integrate analysis of quotations, representative imagery, symbolism, like character evolution, what makes the author's writing style different, how they can connect the text to their life, the text to what's happening in the world, the text to other texts. The sky's the limit. So you can make your one-pager kind of general, or you can really focus in on one of those things. When it comes to novel-based one-pagers, this has kind of been my jam over the years. I created a set of guidelines for these that has 4 different options with 4 different templates and 4 different sets of directions and a rubric that I've been giving away for a long time now. And I've given away more than 20,000 copies of it. And so I get to see this one pager in action in classrooms, sort of featured around the internet pretty often. And it's really a joy. If you would like that set of one pager templates, I'll put the link in the show notes so that you can grab it for free. You can use it or you can use it as inspiration to create your own. Now, another version of a one-pager that I love as an option, you can use it at the end of a novel or at the end of any unit, is an argument one-pager. And the thing I love about an argument one-pager is it practices a lot of the skills of essay writing, of argument design, without getting into a full essay. And so you can do more of them. You could do them with different short texts over and over to practice some of those foundational skills. Or you could do it at the end of a text when you don't have time for an essay, but you want students to work on developing a thesis and finding evidence and making connections to life. And it's quicker, right? It's quicker for students to create. It's quicker for you to grade. It's just like a different spin on practicing argument skills that keeps the practice from getting repetitive. So in an argument one-pager, you can ask students to include their thesis. You can ask them to include various pieces of evidence, 1 or 2 or 5 or whatever you want. You can create sections for that in your template. You can make space for analysis of those pieces of evidence if you want, if that's a skill you're really drilling down on. You could even create a one-pager that was just for analysis of a piece of evidence. This is something that students can struggle with so much, right? They want to dump their evidence and then move on. If you want them to practice drilling down and really explaining how that evidence supports their point, then maybe an argument one-pager you could create would just be evidence analysis. Here's the place where you put your point. Here's the place where you put your evidence. And now all the other sections of the one-pager are getting into, why is that evidence so powerful? What is the counter argument somebody could use against that evidence to say it's not powerful? How could you respond to their counter argument? Just really having students focused exclusively on their analysis of that evidence, but in kind of a fresh new way. Okay, next let's talk about podcast one-pagers. Podcast one-pagers are a handy little trick for helping students stay focused when you're playing them a podcast, whether you're doing a unit on cereal or you're doing maybe a Smash Boom Best and talking about the different arguments people are making. If you're doing a podcast one-pager about one episode, I would recommend you just kind of let students make it as they listen. So it's almost like they're taking notes right onto the sketch note. It's not like or right onto the one-pager template. It's not like a final assessment. It's more of a graphic organizer that's allowing them to stay focused. Now, it's a bit different if you're maybe playing a podcast series for them as a text, or maybe you're doing like 3 different related podcast episodes that kind of get at an important theme or something that's happening in the world today. Then you could do a podcast one-pager that asks them to pull from all of those different episodes as text to get at some kind of an argument or to illustrate some huge theme that's coming through, some crucial idea. And again, you can create the scaffold, you can create a template with specific directions, maybe the main takeaway they got from the podcast shown with words and images, important quotations from the podcast that helped reinforce that big takeaway, that main point that you took home from it. Themes that stood out represented by words and symbols and colors, some illustration of like what the feel of the podcast was like, the style of the speaker, maybe questions that students have as they finish listening. Creating the template for this is very like creating it for a novel. It's just a different type of text. It's an audio text. Similarly, you can do a one-pager with a film, whether you're doing like short documentaries or you're doing a film at the end of a novel unit where it's the film version. If you're doing a film one-pager for the novel film version, like the dramatization of the book. An interesting angle on the film one-pager would be to sort of compare the book and the movie. What did the movie do well? What did it illustrate really well that maybe made them notice something about the book that they hadn't noticed? And then maybe what did the movie do badly? What did it miss? What character did it portray in a way that didn't match the text that the student didn't like? That way you're putting kind of an argument lens on the film that could be interesting for students. Okay, another kind of one-pager that I have come to really like and I have enjoyed doing with students is like an icebreaker one-pager. So in this case, when you get a new group of students, or maybe just as a check-in partway through the year, you use a one-pager to get to know kids better and to help them get to know each other better. And in this case, you're going to map out your template and the elements of your template to do with your students' history, their likes, their dislikes, their interests. And so maybe it's sort of like, make a list of your favorite books in the bottom left-hand corner. Put the lyrics of your favorite song in the upper right-hand corner. Tell us a career goal of yours in the center, or whatever it is. It's pretty fun. It's going to create a great display on your wall as long as you give students the heads up that you're going to be inviting them to share this publicly. Another way to do it is to have them do a getting to know you one-pager right on a folding name tent. And this is certainly one of my favorite assignments of all time because it solves my standard problem of having trouble learning students' names at the beginning of the year. But in this case, you have them fold a piece of paper in half, put their name down the middle, and then map out the sort of quadrants of their name tent to put things like their favorite books, their favorite quotation, the activities they love, that kind of thing. And that way, in the first week or two of the year, you can always look at their name tent, not only to see their name, but also to learn a little bit about them. And you can leave those for subs throughout the year, which is a major bonus too. Okay, next let's talk about characterization one-pagers. This is something I think is really fun. Characterization can be sort of a hard thing to get at with an assignment, but this is a really fun way to explore characterization. The way I created mine is I divided the paper up into 4 sections for 4 different key characters for a mini novel. And I actually created little cartoon people in the middle, just with blank faces, like very boring little cartoon people. It's like a little jacket with little feet and a big round head. But the idea was I didn't want students to feel like they were having to try to draw the characters. Drawing people is so hard. I just wanted them to have a way to kind of put a color on the jacket that would be somehow help move the themes forward, put a word across the face that would represent the character, and then be adding like quotes and drawings and icons and analysis and descriptive words for each character that would really help them pop out of that rectangle in the one-pager. So who are the 4 characters that they feel were most important and interesting, and then how can they illustrate them through descriptions of them, quotes about them, showcasing their evolution, looking at whether they were round or flat, static or dynamic. This is a favorite assignment of mine. I think it can be very interesting and really help students consider more like what is happening with these characters, which ones are interesting, which ones change and evolve and are rich, and which ones, are just kind of a boring quadrant on this page because they're exactly the same throughout the book. And why didn't that person get to tell their story? Like, why didn't they change? Is that an issue in the book? Is it like a character that the author didn't pay attention to for some reason, or is it on purpose? Is that why they're a flat, boring, static character? To make a point? Like, it's just interesting to dive in this kind of visual way and compare the 4 characters right on the page. Okay, next up, TED Talk one-pagers, because why not? TED Talks are such a great asset for our classrooms. Again, kind of like with the podcast, I think if you're just playing one TED Talk, it works pretty well to just give students the one-pager and have them create it as they listen, just as a method of keeping them paying attention, helping them to jot down their takeaways. If you're doing like a series of TED Talks, or you're watching TED Talks with a specific lens, like because they connect to your essential question, or because you're doing like a life skills series or whatever, then you might consider doing a TED Talk one-pager that's a takeaway of multiple texts, in which case students are going to kind of be gathering evidence and ideas and quotes as they watch, and then putting them together in more of like a final assessment package with their one-pager. Next up, poetry one-pagers. Yes, there are poetry one-pagers. Yes, they are really fun. If you want your students to dive deep with analysis of a poem and you don't want to go for like the full-blown poetry essay, once again, a poetry one-pager is going to provide a faster assessment option that still pushes your students to really think critically about the poem. You can ask them to focus on imagery, poetic devices, connections between the poem and other works. You can ask them to look really specifically at the poet's style and how the poet is different from other poets. I also like to include the overall question, do you like this poem? Why or why not? And I don't like to marry that to a specific section on the page. I like that to just be sort of a general thing. They can put that in anywhere. There can be little bits and pieces of, do you like this poem, all over in all the different sections. And that can be kind of like almost like the guiding argument to their one-pager. Like, yes, this is a stunning poem. Let me illustrate it with all of these ideas and my choice of colors and the way that I showcase the quotes. Or, no, I don't like this poem, and I don't like its style, and I don't like its message. And I'm going to share those things, the style and the message and the imagery and whatever, but I'm going to share them through the frame that, yeah, it's not my favorite. It didn't blow me away. Okay, next up, theme one-pagers. And this is maybe, for me personally, one of the more interesting one-pagers because I'm calling it a process one-pager. The way that I designed my instructions for the theme one-pager were created with the intention of moving students from a place of not really knowing what their theme statement was going to be to knowing what their theme statement was going to be. And when I created my model of this with Darcy Little Badger's book, A Snake Falls to Earth, I found it very interesting and powerful. And so for me, that's cool. And so I'm going to walk you through the steps that I put into my one-pager so that you can play with this idea of a process one-pager that helps guide students to where you want them to go. Here's what I came up with for my steps, and I linked them to the areas of the template I created. And there are visuals for all of this in the show notes on the website, nowsparkcreativity.com, if you want to go and see like the full version. There are a lot of visuals to go with this podcast. So first, I asked students to start by choosing several big ideas from the text. I asked them to consider, if you asked the author, what did you really want to show up about humanity by writing this piece? What kind of big ideas do you think would come up in the conversation? Include these big ideas in the 4 circles across the top of your template. Consider using color or imagery to help each big idea stand out. So when I did this, I put across my top 4 circles the idea of transformation, the power of storytelling, environmentalism, and hope. Those were 4 big ideas that for me came out of A Snake Falls to Earth. Next, I asked students, zero in on the big idea you find most important and interesting. Highlight this one in the large circle at the bottom. You might add images around it, use colors to help it stand out, and or add some explanation around it. So from my 4 big ideas, I chose the concept of transformation, and I created illustrations all around it in that part of my one-pager that sort of showcased where transformation showed up in the text. Okay, next in my instructions, I asked students to look through the text and find key moments where the author really brings this big idea to the forefront. These could be descriptions, pieces of character development, or chunks of dialogue. Add 3 key pieces of text to your one-pager in 3 of the 4 remaining sections. So I'm not going to read you all of my quotations from A Snake Falls to Earth, but I went ahead and found these kind of key quotations and I illustrated them in 3 of the remaining sections. Now, I asked students, I said, you've got your big idea, you've got your evidence. After studying both and thinking through the meaning of your big idea and your evidence, add your theme statement to your one-pager. This should be big and bold and clearly highlighted on the page so anyone looking at it would know it's the core of your one-pager. Put it in the final remaining section. So I put mine right down the middle and I tried to use all the colors of my one-pager and just sort of like really highlight the key idea with lots of underlining. And my final theme statement was, when people value their stories and history and use them to grow and connect with others, powerful transformations are possible. And so I went from those kind of one word or short phrase theme ideas like transformation, storytelling, environmentalism, and hope, and I got to that more complex theme statement. Now, obviously, I'm an English teacher. The process for me was interesting, but I did already know how to create a theme statement. But I feel like sort of walking through this piece by piece for students can be really helpful as a process, and they don't have to have everything figured out when they start their one-pager. In fact, they're not even supposed to. And so this can just be a great class activity to help students figure out how to write a theme statement. Okay, we're getting close to the end of all these one-pager ideas, but we're not there yet. There's still a couple more. Shakespeare one-pagers. Shakespeare one-pagers can obviously be pretty similar to all the other ones we've talked about, where you can kind of create your list of things that you want students to focus on. But when I designed my Shakespearean one-pagers, the thing that I most wanted students to think about was connecting the Shakespeare with life now. So whether that was current events, things that were happening politically or socially in the world today, or things that were happening in their own lives, or things that were happening in pop culture and the media, I wanted students to really get out of the mindset that Shakespeare was, writing for people hundreds of years ago, and it's, in language that's really different and it just isn't relevant now. I wanted them to see, oh gosh, it's so relevant. It's so connected to things that are happening today. And so I use the entire top half of my one-pager template to focus in on connections to modern life. And that kind of makes this one-pager extra interesting for me. Okay. Last but not least, I want to talk about how you might create a one-pager for rhetorical analysis. And I think rhetorical analysis lends itself particularly well to a one-pager because of the sort of ethos, pathos, logos thing. So I bet you can already picture there's going to be a big triangle somewhere in your one-pager where students can kind of map elements of ethos in one section, pathos in another section, and logos in another section. And for me, I thought it would be just nice if those all sort of moved in toward the middle where the big main idea would be in the heart of it, in the very center with that triangle of evidence of the rhetorical analysis strategies kind of all moving toward the middle where the big idea is. If you would like to see an example of this and maybe also try it out in your classroom, I have a rhetorical analysis one-pager that focuses in on some rhetoric at the Super Bowl. And I will put the link in the show notes so that you can grab it. And then you can see my model. You can either use it if you think it would be fun to take a look at rhetoric at the Super Bowl, or you can use it as inspiration for a rhetorical analysis one-pager of your own. Okay, my friend, we've reached the end. We've talked about so many things. What is a one-pager? Where can you find great one-pager models? Why use one-pager templates? What elements belong on a one-pager, and how do you integrate them with your templates? What if students still struggle with art? How can you get started with digital one-pagers? And then, of course, so many different one-pager options. Thanks for joining me for all of this. Until next time, take care of yourself and stay creative.